I'm Clara Bennett, lead software architect at MedCore Innovations, and NeuroSense, the AI diagnostic system I've spent 6 years building, is more than just a project to me. It's my life's work, a carefully crafted web of neural networks and algorithms designed to change the future of clinical diagnostics. This lab, nestled in Seattle's Tech District, has been my second home. But today, the usual hum of machines and blinking monitors felt heavy, like the air itself was holding its breath. My workspace is cluttered with notes, sketches, and multiple screens flashing lines of code only I understand. I've always been the quiet backbone behind MedCore's biggest breakthroughs, respected but unseen. That's why it caught me off guard when Isla, the executive assistant who usually gives me a brief nod or a knowing smile, walked past without even looking my way. Her eyes flickered with something tight, guarded, something she was trying to hide, and then she was gone down the hall. For years, I've been plugged into every crucial back-end decision, the first to hear whispers of new strategies, the anchor of our team's technical heart. But today, everything felt different. Locked private channels appeared on my messaging apps overnight. Meetings were scheduled without my name. Conversations stopped the moment I neared. It was as if the pulse of the company was shifting, just out of my reach, and the cold unease in my chest told me I was no longer in the loop. Leaning back in my chair, fingers resting lightly on my keyboard, I knew one thing with terrifying clarity: my place here was about to change. The future I'd painstakingly built was slipping away, and I had no idea how far this silence would stretch. The day began like any other, yet everything felt off from the moment I sat down. Isla's cold glance lingered in my mind, stirring a sense of unease I couldn't shake. I tried to focus, opening my terminal and running the usual diagnostics on NeuroSense. But the buzzing lab around me felt like a silent storm brewing just out of sight. I glanced at my calendar, still blank. No meetings, no stand-ups, nothing. That alone was strange. Usually, I had impromptu catch-ups, especially with the strategy team. But today, nothing. I shrugged it off as a quiet morning and turned my attention back to code. But my gut told me otherwise. That's when the alert popped up on my admin dashboard. A room booking for the Horizon conference room at 9 a.m. A strategy meeting. It seemed curious. I pulled up the attendee list: product compliance, regulatory, marketing, but no engineering, no systems team, and definitely no me. I stared at the screen, disbelief creeping in. I had architected the entire backend of NeuroSense. If there was any strategic planning about the system, I should have been in that room. I quickly switched over to Slack. 3 new private channels had been created overnight, all locked. No invites, no notifications, all tagged with Horizon. My unease deepened. Then Jenna from Program Operations appeared in my doorway, holding a tablet and wearing a smile too bright to be sincere. "Hey Clara, just a heads up," she said hesitantly. "There's a system-wide freeze for the next hour. Execs want the server stable while they run some high-level tests." "Tests?" I asked, narrowing my eyes. "What kind of tests?" She hesitated, glancing toward the hallway. "Not sure. It's internal stuff. Shouldn't affect anything on your end." I studied her for a moment, noticing how tightly she gripped the tablet. Something wasn't right. "Got it," I said flatly. She turned and left. I sat still for a moment, then opened the server access logs. If someone was running tests on NeuroSense, I'd see it, and sure enough, there was a remote login just after 2:43 a.m. into a protected module I was the only one authorized to use. No notes, no trace of approval. Someone had bypassed protocols without informing me. My heart sank. The Horizon doors closed down the hall. For the first time in 6 years, I felt the icy realization: I was being shut out. But it wasn't just silence I feared, it was the unknown. Desperate for answers, I dug deeper. The credentials used for the login were temporary, admin authorized, single use, and system generated, clean and deliberate. Whoever did this went to great lengths to erase any trail. I refreshed Slack again, still locked out of those 3 channels. A quick background check revealed the channels were created by Isla. So she knew. She had to know. That flicker of guilt I thought I saw earlier suddenly made sense. But was I imagining it? Was I filling gaps with paranoia because the truth was too unsettling? I was halfway through drafting a message to the product director when a ping on Slack pulled me back. A new post appeared in the public company announcements channel. Reminder: please refrain from messaging during the 9 o'clock to 10:30 Horizon strategy session unless absolutely critical. Today's update is key to our growth roadmap. Attached was a grainy photo from inside the conference room. My eyes scanned the room. The CEO, Isla, leading the regulatory strategy, and standing at the front, mid-sentence, gesturing toward a projected slide, a man I didn't recognize. Late 40s, sharp sport coat, confident posture, holding a sleek tablet and a laser pointer, smiling like he owned the place. I zoomed in on the slide corner. SmartCare 2.0 Foundational AI Integration. My blood ran cold. SmartCare was the name I'd given to the modular clinical assistant built on top of NeuroSense, trained on hospital workflows, diagnostics, and risk prediction. Foundational AI integration. That phrase was from my original roadmap presentation. Word for word. Who the hell was this guy? Before I could think more, Jenna popped back into my office doorway. Awkward and uneasy. Clara, I wasn't supposed to say anything, but you should know. The guy leading the session is Dr. Noah Blake. He's an AI healthcare consultant from Stanford. The CEO brought him in to advise on the platform. They're calling it SmartCare 2.0 now, a big rebrand push. Blake's been working quietly with the strategy team for weeks. NDA stuff. You know. My chest tightened. Was he using my code? My architecture? Jenna shrugged. His slides have screenshots that look like your system but with new UI wrappers. No one told me much. I wanted to laugh. Or scream. I thought you were part of it, she said quietly. I sat back down as she left. The door clicking shut behind her. Dr. Blake, the consultant, was standing in front of a room full of executives I used to work with, explaining my system like it was his own. And I wasn't even invited. I stared at the live feed again. Blake pointed at one of my neural architecture diagrams, rebranded with sleek gradients, new logos, and his initials on the revision history. Between insult and theft, I was no longer just out of the meeting. I was out of the loop. Out of the room. If I didn't act fast, I'd be out of the company. The conference room was still full. Laughter and chatter leaking faintly through the glass walls. From this distance, it sounded like a celebration. I turned back to my screen and accessed the back-end documentation. If Blake was truly leading SmartCare 2.0, there had to be evidence, code commits, proposal files, something. 3 new directories caught my eye, created within the last 2 weeks. Labeled generic project titles: SC 2.0 Roadmap, Diagnostics Overhaul, UX Rework, All Access Limited, but I still had superuser privileges. I bypassed the locks. Inside, dozens of PDFs, slide decks, and memos, all outlines nearly identical to my proposals from 6 months ago. Not similar, identical. My architecture, my neural pathways, even my internal shorthand. What had been called too ambitious by the CEO was now Blake's initiative. Rebranded and paraded before investors. I clicked through another presentation. My diagrams, copied block for block, now recolored and stamped with Blake's initials. A memo from the CEO stated Blake would lead SmartCare 2.0, crediting him with instrumental insights that positioned MedCore as a leader. It was theft, yet I sat frozen, a silent fury burning beneath my calm. At 10:41 a.m., a calendar invite popped up. Executive debrief, 11 a.m. Office 6C, from Isla. No subject, no details, just a time and an air of finality. I stared for 10 seconds, then clicked accept. Straightening my blazer, I walked down the hall toward the executive wing. Passing smiling department heads exiting Horizon. Whispers died as I approached. The hallway stretched longer than I remembered. Office 6C was open. Jason, our CEO, stood behind his desk, arms folded like a man playing a role he despised. Melissa from HR sat quietly, legal folder open, and Blake, perched casually on the side table, like he owned the room. Clara, Jason said without greeting. Thanks for coming in. Let's get to it. I didn't sit. Jason exchanged a glance with Melissa. Cleared his throat. We're restructuring strategic priorities. MedCore is entering a new phase: external partnerships, investor relations, platform scalability. He glanced at Blake. And part of that is leadership transition for SmartCare. I cut him off. He hasn't written a line of code. Jason nodded calmly. You built the foundation. But scaling requires a different skill set. One that bridges engineering and external positioning. Translation. I was too technical. Too quiet. Too inconvenient for investors. Melissa slid the folder toward me. We're offering a transition support package, 3 months salary. Benefits. We need your credentials and documentation. I didn't touch the folder. So, you want me gone today? But expect me to prep the man replacing me? Jason's smile thinned. Blake has reviewed your codebase. This is about knowledge continuity. I wanted to laugh. Reviewed my codebase? That's like reading Braille with oven mitts. Blake shifted, but Jason pressed on. You've been invaluable, but we need to move forward. I said flatly, voice rising. What's not fair is surrendering the system I built from scratch to someone who plagiarized it and gets applause. Jason stepped forward, cold. We're not debating fairness. We offer you dignity and a generous package. But closure is needed today. I swallowed, cheeks burning. This isn't just firing. It's a public undoing, a calculated erasure. I'll need time to review this, I said, nodding toward the folder. Melissa replied rehearsed, with legal. But we need your laptop and badge by end of day. Jason nodded tight. Let's make this smooth. I looked at Blake once more. His face was neutral, half sympathy, half discomfort. But I saw it. He wasn't sorry. He was settling in. I turned to leave. You're taking the system, but you don't have the keys. And you won't know it's missing anything until it's too late. Jason called after me. Clara, all access credentials. Now. I didn't look back. I didn't slam the door behind me. There was no dramatic exit. No explosive confrontation. Just a quiet click. The sound of a door closing softly but decisively. I walked back through the glass-walled hallway, feeling like a ghost in a place that no longer wanted me. People glanced up briefly from their screens, unsure whether to acknowledge me or pretend I was already gone. I didn't care. I wasn't angry, not in the way most expected. No fiery outburst. No storm of tears, just a steady, sharp pressure behind my ribs, like a cold blade pressed flat against my heart. When I returned to the systems lab, I sat down at my desk, the familiar glow of monitors casting a soft light on my weary face. I packed my things slowly, one mug, a photo frame, my notepad. No one said a word. Jenna peeked over once, then ducked behind her screen. I set my company laptop on the desk, as requested, but I didn't touch my personal machine. That laptop was mine, used only for simulations and private sandbox models. Completely separate from company systems. It was the perfect place for what I was about to do. I slipped into the secondary server room, the smaller, quieter data center where I had spent countless late nights developing NeuroSense's core. The hum of stacked hardware and subtle vibrations felt like a comforting pulse. More familiar than my own apartment. I plugged in, launched a secure session, and opened the NeuroSense authentication matrix, not the public layers or the sanitized API endpoints Blake likely flipped through like a glossy brochure. But the real core engine. The proprietary neural inference system I'd built from scratch. Trained and tuned offline for 3 years. This part of the system wasn't documented anywhere. Wasn't in shared repositories. Didn't use company standard encryption protocols. It was mine, built, maintained, and controlled entirely offline. And it had a secret, a hidden fail-safe I'd programmed deep into the system. An autonomous mode triggered if authentication tokens expired without a valid override. In theory, a safety net to prevent tampering. In practice, leverage. Every 24 hours, NeuroSense pinged a unique biometric hash tied only to me. Without that signal, critical diagnostic modules would slowly degrade, not crash, not fail outright, but quietly reduce accuracy until clinical confidence eroded and alarms sounded. I encrypted the latest control state and copied it to my personal drive. Then I closed the session and wiped the logs, carefully, cleanly, leaving nothing suspicious behind. No sloppy erasures. Just quiet, unremarkable erasure. I shut down the monitor. Sitting in silence. Coldness settled inside me like a second spine. They thought they could replace me. Thought the system I built would keep running just because they slapped a new label on it and handed it to a man with a sharper suit and louder voice. But they didn't understand. I hadn't just built NeuroSense. I had woven myself into it. My instincts, judgment, and fingerprints were embedded in every neural weight and inference rule. Without me, the system could walk, sure, but it couldn't run. And soon, they would learn what that felt like. The first message came at 6:18 a.m. Hey, are you seeing this? NeuroSense flagged a stage 4 cancer alert on a broken wrist case. No metastasis, no indicators, just a full oncology workup out of nowhere. Raj, one of the clinical integration engineers who'd reported to me, was the sender. I hadn't heard from him since my transition. 10 minutes later, another ping. Systems acting weird, diagnostics running out of sequence. Pediatric scans routed through cardiac models. Something's off. I didn't reply, I just watched the messages pile up. By 7:05 a.m., sipping coffee in my kitchen, I scrolled through logs. They didn't know I could still see. The pattern was obvious. NeuroSense's diagnostic modules were staggering. Minor misclassifications here, slight delays there. Nothing catastrophic yet, but cumulative, enough to erode clinical trust faster than a data breach. By 7:26 a.m., error reports had reached the executive tier. Then the phone rang. Blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. It rang again, and again. On the fourth call, I answered. Clara, Jason said, voice clipped tight. We're seeing inconsistencies with the SmartCare rollout. Diagnostic alerts are misfiring. Hospital admins are flagging it. I let the silence stretch. We need you to take a look. He added softer. Just a quick review of inference protocols. You know the system better than anyone. Isn't that what Dr. Blake is for? I asked calmly. A pause. He's working on it, but there are credential issues. Some deep modules are locked behind dependencies he can't trace. Interesting, I murmured, almost like someone embedded protocol-level restrictions requiring a master key. Jason sighed. Clara, please, this isn't politics. Patients are involved. This is critical. The pivot to urgency. The appeal to professionalism. I knew this dance. I wasn't unfeeling. I wanted no harm to come to patients. But I wasn't a martyr. I'll need a consulting agreement, I said flatly. Triple my former salary, full autonomy, access to my sandbox. No Blake, no red tape. Jason didn't argue. Legal will send something within the hour. I hung up, setting my coffee down. It tasted better than it had in weeks. 15 minutes later, an access key arrived in my inbox, along with a stripped-down remote login. I connected to the core, ran a deep integrity check. The audit lit up like a Christmas tree. Blake had tried to modify my architecture, probably panicking, trying to override the degradation protocols without understanding their triggers. In doing so, he corrupted the rule hierarchy governing diagnostic prioritization. The system wasn't broken, it was reacting exactly as designed, shutting down logic it couldn't verify. By 8:42 a.m., I patched the worst. No grand announcement, no parade, just silent recovery. By 9 o'clock, the alerts stopped. At 9:04, my phone buzzed. System stabilized. Thanks. Jason wants to talk next steps. I ignored it. Instead, I opened the real-time dashboard Blake had presented 2 days ago. His name was still listed as lead architect. But it was my code that had just saved the company. My system that hadn't collapsed under sabotage. My design that resisted hijacking long enough to force their hand. I didn't need headlines. I didn't need revenge. The logs would tell the story. For the first time since this nightmare began, I allowed myself a small smile. Vindication doesn't always arrive with applause. Sometimes it's a quiet, blinking green light, the moment your replacement fails, and your legacy holds. At 9:17 a.m., Jason called again. I didn't answer. Instead, I watched the status dashboard shift from red to yellow to green. Each system flickering back online, like a heartbeat restarting slowly. Reluctantly, my code wasn't just working again. It was making a point. After the system stabilized, I thought I might finally breathe. But the real battle was just beginning, one that wasn't fought in lines of code, but in whispers and boardrooms. The Cold War for control over NeuroSense had shifted from technical sabotage to a war of perception. And suddenly, I found myself questioning everything I thought I knew about the people around me, including Isla. Days after my emergency intervention, I noticed subtle shifts in the atmosphere. Isla no longer avoided me outright, but there was a cautious distance, as if she was walking a tightrope between loyalty and survival. Our brief exchanges felt charged, weighed down with unspoken truths. I dug into every thread I could find: emails, memos, Slack messages, piecing together a fractured puzzle. The company was quietly rebranding NeuroSense as SmartCare 2.0, a sleek new product, optimized for investors and scalability, according to the marketing team. But beneath the polished presentations was a calculated effort to rewrite the narrative, to recast me as a technical relic, and Blake as the visionary leader. One evening, as I sat poring over the latest pitch deck from Blake's team, my phone buzzed. It was Raj. "Have you met Liana yet?" he asked casually, leaning against my office doorframe. "Who?" I replied, tired but curious. "Liana Song. She just joined Risk and Audit." Word as she wrote the compliance playbook that half the industry quotes like scripture. That piqued my interest. 2 days later, I found her, standing in the server room. Not where you'd expect a compliance officer to be. Black slacks, high neck blazer, silver-streaked braid pulled tight. She had the sharp, calculating eyes of someone who scanned the world for hidden truths. "I know who you are," she said, shaking my hand firmly. "You built the black box that somehow outperforms every explainable AI model in market trials." "That a compliment?" I asked. "More like a challenge." We met over coffee in a quiet corner of the diagnostics floor. Neutral territory. I expected guarded professionalism. What I got was something more dangerous: curiosity. "You've seen Blake's deck," I said. She nodded. "Multiple versions. The one he sent to the board, the marketing pitch, and one he showed me off the record." My heart sank. "He approached you indirectly?" "Yes," she said. "Claimed it was about transparency. Asked for an internal audit of NeuroSense's early logic paths." She pulled out her laptop, showing me a series of comparative analyses of flagged errors during the week I was consulting but not yet reinstated. "Someone modified the testing environment," she said quietly. "Created false inconsistencies by feeding mismatched patient data through a stripped-down interface." I swallowed hard. "Let me guess. Blake framed the results as proof the system was too opaque for clinical use?" She nodded. "That's why the outputs looked skewed in his deck. The errors weren't organic, they were engineered." A sick mix of relief and fury flooded me. "Can you prove it?" Liana met my eyes. "I already have." I exhaled for the first time in weeks. The tightness in my chest eased. "Why tell me?" She smiled. "Simple and direct. I don't like systems weaponized for politics. I've seen what happens when optics override outcomes." I studied her. "If I want to fight back, expose the pattern. Don't defend yourself. Defend the data. Show where his audit failed. Turn his case into a cautionary tale." I nodded slowly. "Would you help me?" She finished her coffee. Stood. "I already am." That night, we worked side by side in a glass-paneled war room overlooking the server hub. Liana pulled log records. I pulled architecture overlays. Raj joined us with interface data. Together, we rebuilt the storyline. Timestamp by timestamp. Line by line. What emerged wasn't just a rebuttal. It was a blueprint for reversal. Every false flag Blake raised, we traced back to his sandbox. Every mismatch, deliberate sabotage. By midnight, we had a clean, annotated timeline, cross-verified, legally defensible, technically irrefutable. I looked across the table at Liana. "I thought I'd have to survive this alone." I admitted. "You still might," she said, "but now you won't have to fight it blind." For the first time in a long, exhausting war of silence and postures, I felt something unfamiliar settle in my chest. Hope. Not naive optimism. Strategic hope. The kind that comes when the pieces begin to shift, and the board doesn't know it yet. Our plan wasn't to go loud. Not yet. This wasn't about grandstanding or public confrontation. It was about precision. Collecting facts like blades. Placing them one by one where they would cut cleanest. We started the next morning. Liana and I assembled a task group under the guise of a performance stabilization initiative. Raj gathered interface logs. Lisa pulled behavior flags. Our lead infrastructure engineer rerouted system mirroring to a protected sandbox, allowing us to trace anomalies in real time, undisturbed, unfiltered, for 4 days. We lived in that room. No leaks, no chatter, just timestamped evidence growing by the hour. And Blake never suspected. He had spent years building credibility on the premise no one would check his numbers too closely because he looked like someone who didn't need to lie. He was wrong. By day 5, we had everything. We mapped 37 instances where SmartCare's behavior deviated from baseline. Of those, 34 had been seeded directly from Blake's testing environments. Instances where he deliberately overrode standard input protections to reroute incompatible data sets through mismatched modules. A forced mismatch designed to produce failure. Worse, he cleared internal flags after each injection, erasing the trail from the live interface but not from the server logs. Because while he wiped front-end records, he hadn't touched mirrored authentication pings. Liana found them buried 3 layers deep, residual key calls issued under masked sessions. His digital fingerprints left like ghost signatures. I stared at the glowing orange markers in our audit interface. "Are you absolutely sure?" I asked. Liana nodded. I cross-referenced his workstation ID. Same session accessed DevOps notes only Blake had clearance for. There's no other explanation. He didn't just manipulate data. He staged the entire scenario. I sat back. My hands weren't shaking. I wasn't angry. I was done reacting. Now I was moving. That night, I compiled our findings into a formal audit. Not a memo. Not a complaint. An audit. Complete with appendices, log chains, before and after comparisons, user credentials, and a supplemental video walkthrough narrated by Liana herself. No commentary. No accusations. Just evidence. I submitted it to the board at 8:47 a.m. Routed through a direct compliance channel that bypassed JSON entirely. At 9:03, I got a read receipt from the audit chair. At 9:16, a second read from the board secretary. By 9:44, Isla forwarded a calendar invite for a closed-door session scheduled that afternoon. Subject line: Internal Security Review. SmartCare Deployment. No one called me. No one acknowledged the file. But I didn't need them to. The system would speak for itself. I looked around our war room, whiteboards covered in diagrams, coffee cups pushed to corners, digital logs scrolling across monitors. Raj was debugging a test loop. Liana annotated the timeline. Lisa reviewed regression plots. This was no longer defense. It was reckoning. And we were ready. The morning of the internal security review arrived with a strange mix of anticipation and calm. I wasn't nervous. I was prepared, not just with facts and evidence, but with something far more valuable: clarity. The conference room was all chrome and polished surfaces. A long oval table surrounded by impeccably dressed executives whose faces tried hard not to betray surprise. Jason sat at one end, his posture stiff, hands clenched tightly on the table. Isla was there too, her expression carefully neutral. But most importantly, I noticed the absence of one key player, Dr. Noah Blake. Strategic or cowardly? Probably both. I took the open seat near the center. Isla handed me a water bottle. But I didn't touch it. I didn't need comfort, I needed clarity. The board chair cleared his throat and addressed me formally. "Ms. Bennett, thank you for joining us on such short notice. We've reviewed the preliminary materials submitted through compliance channels. You'll have 15 minutes to walk us through your findings." I nodded, tapping my tablet. The monitor behind me lit up with a live dashboard pulled from our secured audit sandbox. No frills, no drama, just data. "Let me be clear," I began, voice steady and firm. The errors reported in the last SmartCare update cycle were not organic. They were not due to black box opacity or failure of core architecture. I advanced to the first slide, a series of timestamp logs highlighting inconsistencies. They were fabricated. The room shifted. Several board members leaned forward. The general counsel narrowed her eyes. I continued. Dr. Blake manipulated input routing in live simulation environments without engineering clearance. He stripped away context tags, rerouted patient archetypes, and ran logic trees through incomplete modules. The resulting errors were then compiled into a pitch deck presented as evidence of system instability. I paused, letting the weight of the claims sink in. The logs don't lie. Each action is timestamped, workstation authenticated, matching Blake's unique session ID across 3 mirrored servers. I advanced the slide. This is one of 34 matched incidents, I said, highlighting annotated before and after states and impact assessments. None of these anomalies occurred in production environments. Only in Blake's sandbox. A tense silence followed. The board wasn't shocked. They were assessing fallout. Finally, the audit chair spoke. And the current status of NeuroSense? Stable, I replied. Since my reinstatement, all core modules have been restored. Unauthorized access points closed. Current hospital deployments are operating at 98.7% inference efficiency. Jason cleared his throat. Let's be careful with our language. Dr. Blake's intentions may have been self-serving, but not malicious. I cut in. Unethical, I said flatly. Let's call it what it is. Another silence. The chair folded his hands. Effective immediately. Dr. Blake's consultancy with MedCore is suspended pending formal investigation. His privileges revoked. Jason flinched but said nothing. We will also restructure the Diagnostic Systems Division. The chair continued. Ms. Bennett, we'd like a proposal by week's end for a permanent governance framework led internally, ensuring full transparency and accountability. I nodded, calm but resolute. This wasn't about triumph or revenge. It was about justice. I gathered my notes, meeting the room's gaze. This wasn't about protecting my code, I said clearly. It was about protecting the truth. I stood and walked out, head held high, hands steady. I was no longer fighting for a seat at the table. I was redesigning the table itself. The next few days blurred in a whirlwind of meetings, drafting proposals, and rebuilding trust within the team. I worked closely with Liana, Raj, and Lisa to craft the new governance framework, a transparent, auditable process designed to prevent future internal sabotage and ensure data integrity. Our approach balanced technical rigor with legal oversight, blending AI ethics, compliance, and engineering best practices into one cohesive model. It wasn't easy. Resistance surfaced in quiet corners and passive emails. But the board's mandate was clear. By midweek, our proposal was ready, a blueprint for the future. I submitted it to the CTO, Daniel, who surprised me with his swift support. Congratulations, Clara, he said, stopping by my office. You earned this. I smiled, though it felt strange. How so? Because you didn't win by crushing anyone, he said quietly. You won by outlasting. There's a difference. That night, I sat alone in the lab, surrounded by glowing monitors and humming servers. I opened NeuroSense's core code, the real version, untouched except by me, scrolling through lines of hidden modules, adaptive learning weights fine-tuned over years. I felt a profound mixture of pride and responsibility. It was beautiful, intricate, mine, but it couldn't stay hidden forever. Systems don't grow in shadows, and neither do people. So, I created a new branch, NeuroSense Training V1. Not the full source. Some parts were too sensitive, but enough for others to study the architecture, understand the logic, and carry it forward. That afternoon, I pinged Raj. Let's talk succession. It's time we train someone to lead NeuroSense V3. His reply came almost instantly. Seriously? Seriously, I said. I locked the branch, wrote the documentation, and sent it to the training group. Later, Liana came to my office. You're giving this away. Not giving, I corrected her. Building a bridge. She studied me for a long moment, then smiled. You're going to be a different kind of executive. I hope so, I whispered. That evening, I watched the office empty from the same glass wall I once stood behind, uninvited, unseen. Now, they saw me, and more importantly, they saw what I had built. Not just a system, but a legacy, with room to evolve, one that no longer needed guarding. because it was ready to be shared. In the weeks following the board's decision, the air at MedCore shifted once again. But this time, it felt different, less fraught with tension, more charged with cautious optimism. I was no longer on the outside looking in. I was firmly back at the center of the action. And with that came a weighty responsibility I hadn't fully anticipated. Leading the AI Systems and Architecture division was not just a promotion, it was a transformation. The role demanded more than coding brilliance, it required diplomacy, strategic thinking, and a newfound capacity for leadership. I wasn't just a solitary architect anymore. I was a team builder, a communicator, a steward of a vision larger than myself. At first, the transition was daunting. I had spent years honing my technical skills in quiet isolation. But now I needed to learn how to inspire others, delegate, and manage expectations across departments. I remember one early meeting with the newly formed governance team. My usual directness, honed in the trenches of code reviews and system debugging, had to soften. I had to listen more, understand different perspectives, and foster collaboration. Liana became an indispensable partner, bridging the gap between compliance and engineering. Her sharp insights challenged me to think beyond technical correctness and into ethical implications and regulatory realities. Together, we worked to create a culture of transparency and accountability, not just through policies, but through shared values and trust. One moment stands out vividly. I was presenting our revised AI model to the executive leadership. The room was filled with familiar faces, many of whom had doubted me before. As I explained the new explainability protocols and the ways we'd embedded auditability into NeuroSense's core, I saw something in their eyes, a shift from skepticism to respect. It was a turning point, not just for them, but for me. I realized I wasn't just fighting to save a system anymore. I was shaping the future of healthcare technology in a way that balanced innovation with integrity. But growth wasn't linear. There were setbacks and moments of self-doubt. Managing competing priorities, navigating office politics, and balancing technical demands with strategic goals stretched me in ways I hadn't expected. I remember late nights wrestling with a particularly thorny issue: how to integrate new compliance requirements without compromising system performance. It was a delicate dance, one that required patience and creativity. During those moments, I drew strength from the knowledge that I wasn't alone. Raj, Lisa, Liana, and the entire team had rallied behind the mission. Their dedication reminded me daily why I fought so hard to protect NeuroSense, not just for myself, but for the patients who relied on its accuracy. As the months passed, I found myself evolving, not just as a leader but as a person. I learned to embrace vulnerability, admitting when I didn't have all the answers. I discovered the power of listening, of building consensus rather than dictating solutions. Most importantly, I learned that legacy isn't about holding on to control. It's about empowering others to carry the torch forward. One afternoon, Liana stopped by my office with a proposal. "We need to start mentoring the next generation," she said, "people who understand both the tech and the ethics." I nodded. I agree. It's time we build a succession plan, not just for the system, but for leadership. That conversation sparked a new initiative. We launched a training program designed to cultivate future AI architects who could balance innovation with responsibility. I took on the role of mentor, guiding young engineers and encouraging them to think holistically about the impact of their work. Watching them grow was deeply rewarding. Their fresh perspectives challenged me, kept me humble, and inspired me to keep pushing boundaries. Looking back, I realize how much this journey changed me. I started as a quiet coder, overlooked and underestimated. I was sidelined, silenced, and nearly erased. But through perseverance, strategic thinking, and the support of a few allies, I reclaimed not just my role, but my voice. Now, as I walk the halls of MedCore, I don't just see a company. I see a community, a legacy in motion. And I know this is just the beginning. Standing in my new office, the city skyline stretching beyond the glass walls, I often find myself reflecting on the journey that brought me here. It hasn't been easy, far from it. But every struggle, every setback, every moment of doubt shaped me into the person I am today. More than that, It shaped the legacy I am proud to lead. When I first walked into MedCore, I was just a software architect with a vision, a belief that AI could transform healthcare. That technology could save lives if built with care and precision. I worked tirelessly behind the scenes, pouring myself into the code, the algorithms, the endless testing, but no one told me the fight would be as much about politics and power as about programming. Being sidelined, replaced, erased, those were brutal blows. The betrayal cut deep, but it also ignited something fierce within me. I realized that building a system was not enough. I had to build trust, transparency, and resilience into everything I touched. When Blake tried to steal my work, to rewrite the narrative and cast me out, I faced a choice: walk away quietly or fight back with everything I had. I chose the latter. That fight was exhausting, lonely, and at times terrifying, but I wasn't alone. Allies appeared, some expected, others surprising. People like Liana, who saw beyond the surface and believed in the truth. Raj, Lisa, and many others who rallied quietly behind the scenes. Together, we didn't just defend a system. We defended a vision, one where technology serves humanity with honesty and integrity. The board's decision to reinstate me and restructure the division was a victory, but more importantly, it was a new beginning. Leading the AI Systems and Architecture division meant more than managing code, it meant shaping culture, influencing policy, and mentoring the next generation. I learned that leadership isn't about having all the answers. It's about asking the right questions, empowering others, and embracing vulnerability. One of the most profound moments came when I launched the mentorship program. Watching young engineers approach problems with fresh eyes, eager to learn and innovate, reminded me why I fought so hard. Legacy isn't about holding power, it's about passing the torch. And now, as Chief AI Officer, I have the platform to champion transparency, ethics, and innovation on a scale I once only dreamed of. There are still challenges ahead. The tech landscape evolves rapidly, regulations tighten, and the stakes grow higher. But I face these challenges with confidence, not because the path is easy, but because I know the value of perseverance and integrity. I want others to know that setbacks don't define you. Being overlooked or underestimated doesn't diminish your worth. The real test is how you respond, whether you let adversity silence you or fuel your resolve. My story is not just about reclaiming what was taken. It's about building something stronger, fairer, and more resilient. It's about turning betrayal into opportunity, silence into a powerful voice. And most of all, it's about leading with purpose. When I look at NeuroSense today, I don't just see lines of code or data streams. I see the impact: patients whose diagnoses are more accurate, doctors empowered with better tools, and a healthcare system slowly evolving toward a future where technology and humanity walk hand in hand. This journey has taught me that true innovation requires more than technical skill. It demands courage, collaboration, and unwavering commitment to truth. So to anyone out there feeling sidelined or silenced, remember, your voice matters, your work matters, and sometimes, the quietest fights produce the loudest echoes. I didn't just survive the storm, I harnessed it. And now, I'm helping to shape a future where AI doesn't just exist but thrives with integrity. This is my legacy. Through this journey, I learned that resilience is more than just enduring hardship, it's about adapting, strategizing, and reclaiming your power with clarity and purpose. When faced with betrayal and exclusion, the most important tool isn't just technical skill or raw talent, it's the courage to stand firm in your truth, the wisdom to seek allies, and the patience to build evidence that speaks louder than words. Sometimes, the battles we face aren't just about what we build, but about protecting the integrity and values behind it. In a world that often favors the loudest voices, persistence and strategic action can reclaim not only what was lost but also reshape the future. If you ever feel sidelined at work, undervalued, or pushed out of important decisions, remember to keep your composure and gather facts meticulously. Build alliances quietly but purposefully, and document your contributions clearly. Don't rush into confrontation. Focus on creating undeniable evidence of your value and the truth. Seek out mentors or experts who can help you navigate complex challenges. Finally, be ready to step into leadership not just by technical merit but by demonstrating integrity, strategic vision, and emotional intelligence. Your legacy is not just in the work you do, but in the way you lead, inspire, and empower others to carry the mission forward. Thank you for choosing to listen to this story among thousands of stories out there. Like and subscribe to continue listening to the latest stories.